Most raised bed gardens don't fail because of bad seeds, pests, or even weather. They fail because the soil was built wrong from day one. People throw together a mix that looks good on the surface, plant into it, and then spend the entire season chasing problems that shouldn't exist in the first place. Weak growth, constant watering issues, nutrient deficiencies that show up mid-season. These are not random. They're predictable consequences of poor soil structure and biology. If you've ever had a raised bed that started strong and then slowly declined, or one that never quite delivered the yields you expected, this is where the problem started. Raised beds are completely artificial environments. Unlike in-ground soil, they don't have decades of organic matter cycling, microbial networks, or stable mineral composition. That means you are responsible for building everything from scratch, and if you get it wrong, the plants will tell you. The good news is that once you understand how to build soil properly, you stop guessing, you stop reacting, you start growing consistently productive beds that improve over time instead of degrading. And before we go deeper into that, I want to take a moment to say something that matters beyond the garden. There are dog rescue organizations out there doing incredible work, taking in abandoned, injured, and neglected dogs that wouldn't survive on their own. These groups rely entirely on donations to keep going. If you're getting value from this video and you're in a position to help, even a small contribution can feed a dog, pay for treatment, or literally save a life. It's one of those small actions that has a very real impact. Now let's talk about what actually makes a raised bed soil mix work. Not what looks good in a bag, not what sounds organic, but what consistently produces strong plants. The biggest mistake I see is people focusing only on ingredients and ignoring structure. They'll mix compost, topsoil, and maybe some coco coir, but they don't think about how water moves through that mix, how air gets into it, or how roots interact with it over time. Soil is not just a container, it's a living system. A reliable baseline that I've tested across multiple beds is a 40-30-30 ratio. That's 40% high-quality compost, 30% aeration material, and 30% moisture-retaining base like coco coir or peat moss. But here's where people go wrong. They treat all compost and all aeration materials as equal, and they're not. Your compost should be dark, crumbly, and fully finished. If it smells sour or still has recognizable material, it's not ready. In a small backyard bed, that might mean sourcing from 2 different suppliers and blending them. One compost might be rich but dense, another lighter but less nutrient heavy. Together they balance out. For aeration, don't rely on sand. Sand compacts over time in raised beds, especially when mixed with organic matter. Use something like perlite, pumice, or rice hulls. I personally lean toward pumice if I can get it because it doesn't break down as quickly. That means your soil stays structurally stable for longer. And this is where something like a mycorrhizal inoculant, specifically a product like Great White Mycorrhizae, becomes a game changer. I'll link it in the description below. When you're building soil from scratch, you're missing the natural fungal networks that exist in healthy ground soil. These fungi form relationships with plant roots, extending their ability to absorb water and nutrients far beyond what roots can do alone. I've seen noticeable differences in root mass and plant vigor when this is added at planting time, especially in new beds. Now, let's get practical. Imagine you're filling a standard 4x8 raised bed that's about 12 inches deep. That's roughly 32 cubic feet of soil. You'd want about 13 cubic feet of compost, 10 cubic feet of aeration, and 10 cubic feet of coco coir or peat. But don't just dump and mix randomly. Layer it first, then blend thoroughly. Dry pockets of peat or coco coir can repel water if not properly hydrated, so pre-moisten that component before mixing. Once everything is combined, water it deeply and let it sit for a few days before planting. This allows the materials to settle and the microbial activity to begin stabilizing. If you're using something like the mycorrhizal inoculant, apply it directly to the root zone when transplanting rather than mixing it into the entire bed. It's more efficient that way. Now here's something most people don't talk about. Your soil mix should evolve. What you start with is not what you maintain. After your first growing cycle, the organic matter begins breaking down, and your soil will naturally compact slightly. That's not a failure, it's part of the process. At the end of each season, I top dress with about 1 to 2 inches of fresh compost and lightly mix it into the top layer. I don't dig deep. You want to preserve the structure and microbial life you've built. This is also a great time to reapply a small amount of mycorrhizal fungi. If you're replanting heavily, you're essentially reinforcing that underground network. Let's talk about water management, because this is where even good soil mixes fail. If your bed dries out too quickly, your aeration is too high, or your organic matter is too low. If it stays soggy, you've gone too heavy on compost, or your base material is holding too much water. The balance is not theoretical. You'll see it within the first few weeks. In hot climates or during dry seasons, I sometimes adjust the mix slightly by increasing the moisture-retaining component to around 35%. In cooler or wetter conditions, I lean more into aeration. Soil is not static, it responds to environment, and so should your approach. Now, if you're someone experimenting with hydroponics, this might sound unrelated, but the principles are the same. In hydro systems, you're replacing soil with a controlled medium and nutrient solution. But even there, root health depends heavily on oxygen availability and microbial interactions. I've actually used mycorrhizal inoculants in certain semi-hydro setups with cocoa coir, and while the effect is less dramatic than in soil, there's still a noticeable improvement in root resilience. Back in raised beds, one of the most overlooked elements is mineral balance. Compost provides nutrients, but it doesn't always provide the full spectrum. Adding something like rock dust or a balanced organic fertilizer at the beginning can make a big difference over time. Not in a dramatic, immediate way, but in the long-term health of your plants. You'll notice fewer deficiencies, more consistent growth, and better flavor in your crops. And that's really the goal. Not just growth, but quality. Another mistake I see is over-amending mid-season. People panic when they see yellowing leaves or slow growth and start adding random fertilizers. This often makes things worse. If your base soil is built correctly, most issues can be corrected with simple adjustments. Consistent watering, maybe a light compost tea, or addressing pests if they're present. Healthy soil buffers problems. Poor soil amplifies them. And this is why I keep coming back to biology. Structure matters, nutrients matter, but biology is what ties everything together. That invisible network of microbes and fungi is what turns raw materials into plant-available nutrients. It's what helps roots adapt to stress. It's what makes a good soil mix great. Products like the mycorrhizal inoculant aren't magic, but they fill a gap that's very real in raised beds. You're essentially speeding up a natural process that would otherwise take years to develop. Now let's address cost, because I know that's a factor for many growers. Building a high-quality soil mix up front is more expensive than buying cheap topsoil and hoping for the best. But here's the trade-off. You do it once, and then you maintain it. Cheap soil often leads to repeated inputs, poor yields, and constant frustration. In a small backyard setup, the difference might be a few thousand shillings up front. But over multiple seasons, the return in terms of food quality and quantity easily outweighs that. And if you're growing for income, this becomes even more critical. Consistency is everything. You can't afford to have beds underperform because the soil wasn't built right. So take the time to do it properly. Measure your ratios, source good materials, think about structure, not just ingredients, and don't ignore the biological side of the equation. Because at the end of the day, you're not just filling a box with dirt, You're building an ecosystem. If this video helped you rethink how you approach soil, subscribe and share it with someone who's serious about growing better food. The more people understand this, the fewer gardens we'll see struggling for reasons that are completely avoidable. And as you build or rebuild your own beds, don't underestimate the impact of getting the biology right from the start. Even something as simple as using a solid mycorrhizal inoculant can be the difference between a bed that survives and one that truly thrives.